Potash Showdown. How a U.S. Canada trade clash is already hitting American grocery bills. A new and unexpected disruption has entered the North American trade landscape, and it isn't unfolding in press briefings or diplomatic summits. Instead, its effects are emerging in American refrigerators and supermarket aisles. What began as a political threat has already turned into higher food costs for millions of households. Former President Donald Trump's warnings about imposing harsh tariffs on Canadian potash were not empty words. Markets reacted instantly. "We'll end up putting very severe tariffs on that if we have to," Trump declared. Meanwhile, Canadian officials pushed back, emphasizing that they did not seek confrontation. "We didn't ask for this fight," they said, adding that Canadians are always prepared when someone else drops the gloves. In an appointed message to Washington, "In trade as in hockey, Canada will win." Canadian leaders argue that Trump's position is an attack on their families, workers, and businesses, one they cannot afford to let succeed. But even before any formal tariffs are implemented, the impact is already visible across the United States. What was intended as political pressure is now contributing to a rising cost of living, driven by nothing more than a fear of what might come next. Market shock from words alone. In early January, potash prices hovered around $33 per ton. Within weeks, simply from tariff threats, they skyrocketed to $348 by late February. No law changed. No official policy was enacted. The shift was powered entirely by uncertainty. The U.S. government, seemingly aware of the potential economic fallout, immediately began preparations for a $12 billion farm relief package. When combined with previous cycles of tariff-driven turbulence, federal support for farmers now approaches $40 billion. Yet all of this is unfolding before a single tariff has actually been put into place. These developments reveal a structural problem. America's agricultural system is deeply reliant on potash imports, and nearly all of them come from north of the border. Canada's potash dominance. Canada is not just a major producer. It is the world's largest, home to massive reserves estimated at 1.1 billion tons. Its 11 operating potash mines, all located in Saskatchewan, produced nearly 22 million tons in 2023. That represented roughly one-third of global supply. More than 40% of the world's potash exports that year came from Canada. For the United States, this dominance is not an abstraction. In 2023, nearly 90% of U.S. potash imports came directly from Canadian mines. The American agricultural sector is built around this supply chain. The fertilizer used in fields across the Midwest is overwhelmingly dependent on Canadian shipments. Even without tariffs, the industry faces instability. "You would still obviously have to have Canadian potash," one expert noted, "and that import tariff would just be something that would have to be absorbed. There is no short-term substitute. The geology that formed Canada's potash deposits cannot be replicated in the United States by political will." Tariffs, a cost paid by Americans, not Canadians. While tariff threats may sound like actions directed at Canada, economists emphasize a simple, often overlooked reality. Tariffs are paid by the importer. In this case, that means American companies, American farmers, and ultimately American consumers. Nutrien, one of the world's largest potash producers, has stated directly that added tariff expenses would be passed down the chain, first to farmers, then to grocery shoppers. For U.S. corn growers in particular, fertilizer already represents roughly 22% of total production costs. A sharp rise in potash prices could jeopardize farm profitability across the board. Across agricultural regions, the consequences are not hypothetical. Farm bankruptcies are increasing. Foreclosures are rising. Farmer suicide rates are up. Many producers say the administration is insisting its tariffs are helpful, even as their financial situations worsen. Consumers are also feeling pressure. Some anticipate reducing food quality or cutting back on items like wine and coffee. In one projection, a 25% tariff could raise import costs by more than $100 per ton, turning potash into a geopolitical lever instead of a predictable input. From farm fields to grocery store shelves, The chain reaction is straightforward. When fertilizer becomes more expensive, food becomes more expensive. Geology versus politics, political positions can shift overnight, but geological realities remain fixed. Saskatchewan's potash deposits exist independently of any political dispute, yet they shape North America's food supply in ways policymakers cannot ignore. All 11 of Canada's potash mines are concentrated in a single province. The United States has no comparable reserves. Building new mines domestically would require years, sometimes more than a decade, due to permitting, exploration, and infrastructure requirements. Farmers, however, operate on seasonal schedules. They cannot pause their production cycles while waiting for long-term mining projects. This creates a structural imbalance. One nation may deliver threats, but the other controls an irreplaceable resource. How dependent is American agriculture? While the U.S. agricultural system is often described as strong and self-sufficient, its dependence on potash imports tells a different story. America imports about 90% of the potash it uses. Approximately 80% of that imported supply comes from Canada, amounting to an estimated 7 to 10 million tons annually. Alternative global suppliers, such as Russia and Belarus, once played a significant role in world markets. But sanctions and geopolitical tensions have drastically limited their accessibility for U.S. buyers. Few global supply chains rely as heavily on a single partner as American agriculture depends on Canadian potash. Any border slowdown, tariff escalation, or logistical disruption would have immediate and significant consequences. Ottawa's strategy: leverage through stability, while Washington has issued rapid, high-profile tariff threats. Canada is adopting a slower, more structurally grounded approach. Prime Minister Mark Carney has stressed that Canada will negotiate with the U.S. on our own terms, signaling confidence rooted in geological leverage. Rather than center its diplomacy around reaction to Washington, Canada's early international outreach under Carney has focused on Europe and the expansion of reliable trade corridors. Analysts view this as a deliberate strategy to diversify export destinations and reduce vulnerability to U.S. decisions. Officials describe the approach as conceding time, not structure. By allowing the agricultural seasons to unfold naturally, Ottawa ensures that American farmers, and eventually American consumers, will feel the economic consequences of elevated potash costs. Rising food prices, rather than public political drama, may exert more lasting pressure on U.S. policymakers. Meanwhile, Canada aims to reinforce its image as a stable supplier in a volatile world, something global markets increasingly value. Retaliation and reinforcement. Canada's response to earlier U.S. tariffs was not symbolic. Ottawa imposed counter-tariffs covering roughly $30 billion worth of American goods, targeting sectors with significant political influence. It then signaled readiness to escalate further with a second round, potentially affecting $125 billion in additional U.S. products. A previous $60 billion package underscored that Canada did not intend to absorb pressure without equal force. To protect its domestic agricultural economy, Ottawa allocated $1 billion through Farm Credit Canada. Manitoba added a $1.5 million provincial support program, while Saskatchewan coordinated with federal leaders to create a unified national response aimed at preventing forced asset sales and cushioning producers from financial strain. Together, these actions show a country preparing not merely to react, but to reshape its long-term trade posture toward greater diversity and resilience. A warning about weaponizing essentials: this dispute is not just a clash over potash. It is a warning. Attempting to use tariffs to influence access to an essential agricultural nutrient is, as one analyst put it, like trying to tax oxygen in a hospital. Potash is irreplaceable. Food production chemistry does not respond to political agendas. Fertilizer, water, food, and energy form the backbone of societal stability. Turning these essentials into tools of short-term political leverage risks creating long-term instability. Canada, backed by its geological advantage, is positioning itself as a reliable, steady supplier. The United States, by contrast, is pulling critical inputs into a political arena, even those tied to everyday survival. In an era defined by climate disruptions, geopolitical conflicts, and fragile supply chains, nations must choose what they trust more: political rhetoric or geological reality. And in that question lies the broader implications of this escalating potash conflict.